Welcome to another edition of Director Tech Talk. I'm James Wyngaard, Director of Rice Lake Community Media, and we're being joined today by Derek Westby, the Director of WTCO TV in Trempealeau County. Hello, Derek.
Hello, James. How are you?
I am well. Good to see you again. And we are going to cover a topic that I think is interesting, I hope, to a lot of people, and that is drones. And first of all, let's talk a little bit about what exactly a drone is.
Well, a drone is any flying device that is unmanned, which means you're not on it. So drones can be as small as, a couple of ounces, a little tiny helicopter toy that can be a drone, but it's not a drone that has to meet a lot of regulations.
Right. It's more than a half a pound, but less than 55 pounds, I think, is kind of what the traditional definition is. And those are kind of the parameters that you have to have in order to fly one under FAA license, correct?
Correct.
Let's talk about what it takes to get into flying drones. I mean, you can't just necessarily pick one up at the store. Well, you can, I suppose, but traditionally, the idea is you go and grab one at the store, you have to register it, you have to license it and yourself, and talk about that process. I know you've gone through that just recently, so what kind of a process is it, and how long is it, and what do you have to do?
It's actually quite a big process. So when you buy a drone, if it weighs between 0.55 pounds and 55 pounds, you have to register it with the FAA. So to do so, you have to create an account on their drone website to register your drone. Then you have to create an account on a different website to track your airman status. And then you sign up to be an airman. Then you have to create another account on another website to take a test. And the test is I believe it was 80 questions, and you have 2 hours to take the test. It's a proctored test, so they watch you the whole time to make sure you don't cheat. Generally, you have to go to an airport to take the test. That's where most testing centers are. You have to pass the test with 70% correct or more, and then you get your test results, put them into the other portal where you signed up to be an airman. Then they run an FBI background check and a TSA background check to make sure you're not a person who's going to cause harm with the drone. Then they give you your drone license.
Oh, then you finally get it.
Right. And you always have a ton of regulations you have to follow. So
let's go down some of the list of the regulations that you have to follow. I mean, you're basically a pilot, right? And you have to go through and part of the testing and what they quiz you on is being able to read reports and maps and figuring out what kind of airspace you're in and all that sort of thing. Kind of walk us through a little bit about some of the things that you have to look out for even before you put the drone in the air.
Well, generally there's an app for most phones called Before You Fly. And when you open that, it gives you all of your current regulations based off of where you are. So the other day, I was flying our drone here down in Arcadia. And I got a notification on my Before You Fly app that in 23 hours, I was going to be in restricted airspace because the president was flying into La Crosse. So you have to check the Before You Fly app before you even launch your drone, because even if it's clear airspace on your sectional chart, it might be under restrictions from the government, such as a presidential no-fly zone. So first you check that. You also have to check the nearest airport's TAF report, which is a weather report, which will determine your statute miles of visibility, because you have to have a minimum of 3 statute miles of visibility to even be able to fly your drone. Then you can't go above 400 feet from the ground level. You have to stay out of restricted airspace, which is 18,000 feet from sea level, but then airports such as like the Eau Claire or Rice Lake Airport, they have a Class D airspace because they're not a international airport. And that generally takes place 700 feet from ground level. So you have a lot of mix between ground level and sea level in your requirements. So you can't fly above 400 feet from ground level, or 400 feet from the top of a tall building within 400 feet of that building.
So it's just remarkable, but I get why it's so restrictive, because you know, if you've got a 20-pound or a 30-pound or 40-pound drone, and my understanding is sometimes they can go as fast as 40, 50, 60, 70, up to 100 miles an hour. If you run into something, or accidentally or on purpose or whatever, you crash it, you could really cause some serious damage.
Yeah, and if you cause more than $500 of damage to somebody else's property, you have to file a report with the FAA, and you have 10 days to do so. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to lose your drone license unless you were, grossly negligent and what you were doing was violating all kinds of laws. But another thing you have to remember is drones always yield to planes. So if there's a low-flying plane, you have to land your drone.
Right, because we've seen many reports over the last, 4, 5, 6 years, where somebody has a drone in the area, maybe of an airport, maybe not. Maybe it's out over a field, and a farmer happens to be out there and spraying crops or whatnot, and all of a sudden, drone meets plane, or plane meets drone, and then you've got much bigger issues than whether or not you've flown over 400 feet above ground level.
And a lot of more modern drones, such as the drone we have here in Trempealeau County, it will actually pick up on other aircraft in the area and give you a warning. So there's just a ton of regulations. There's also regulations on how much airspace you actually own. So like if you own a house, you own at least 83 feet above the ground. At least. There's no firm definition until you hit 500 feet. Once you hit 500 feet in a busy airspace, you no longer have air rights. If you're in a not very busy airspace, like if you're in the middle of nowhere and there's not major plane routes above you, you have 1,000 feet. But the 83 feet to 500 feet, nobody has decided on yet. That's kind of a gray space. And that was set by a lawsuit in 1946, where a plane flew 83 feet above a farmer's farm, and all of his chickens killed themselves. Because they got so scared they tried to fly and hit a wall. So from that 1946 lawsuit, you have at least 83 feet, but nobody knows. So just be careful.
Nobody knows. Got it. So let's talk a little bit about reasons that you might fly a drone. So, of course, the one reason would be I want to just get pretty shots of my area. So we take it and fly it up Rice Lake, from one end to the other. And we're out over the water, not bothering anybody, not bothering the boaters. We're high enough out of the way where everybody's happy, and people don't. I mean, they admittedly they make some noise, of course, but if you're high enough out of over the heads of people or water or boaters, whatever, you really can't hear them. So the second part of it would be you want to do it for commercial purposes. And if you're doing it as just a person who wants to fly it for fun, that is incredibly different than doing it as a commercial flyer, correct?
Correct. For personal use, you still have to pass a recreational UAS safety test, which is not near as complicated as the commercial test. But if you're flying for any reason other than personal use, you have to get that remote airman license from the FAA. You just have to.
And that's what's called Part 107.
Yes, Part 107. Part 107 is the section that dictates all the requirements and that you have to be licensed. But you might fly a drone to take video or pictures for real estate, community television, promotional video, movies. You can also use drones to do inspections of towers now. So they used radio towers. You used to have to climb up it and look at it every so far to make sure the tower was still safe. Now people use drones for that, and they can monitor the tower from the drone.
And from what I understand, especially in the real estate business, but now getting into this tower inspection business, this could very well be a very lucrative market.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, companies will pay a lot of money to have a licensed drone pilot take out, and it doesn't matter. Obviously, you get into some of these larger drones, and the camera quality is going to be better, and the video quality is going to be better. But to take it up to the top of a 1,000-foot broadcast tower or something like that saves an awful lot of work and the manpower of just climbing up the tower. So what are some of the other things that we need to look out for when it comes to flying a drone, especially can you fly a drone in a state park in Wisconsin?
No. There are some areas that aren't where you can't fly a drone. You can't fly a drone in any state park or nature area, and that's a DNR regulation. That's not a law, but it's a regulation by the DNR. You're in their property. You have to abide by that. You also cannot fly over correctional facilities. You can't fly over federal prisons, state prisons or jails, or even county jails. So I work here in Trempealeau County in the courthouse. I can't legally fly a drone over the building I work in.
Not that you'd necessarily want to anyway, but of course, because the jail, the sheriff's department is within your building, you can't regardless.
Right. And there's a lot of restricted airspace out there, so you have to really look at your sectional chart to know where that is.
Well, sectional chart, and I know there are some drone companies also include links to state regulations, and in Wisconsin, I think there's only maybe one or two state regulations that says you can only do certain things at certain times, but then individual municipalities, I know here Chautauqua has something specific to it. The city of Green Bay has it for Lambeau Field and that area. But otherwise, it's really making sure that you're understanding what those reports and the maps are.
Yeah, and a lot of it is more, they just want to keep everybody safe. That's really the whole thing with it. They want to keep airplanes safe. They want to keep people safe. They want to keep stadiums safe because they don't want somebody to fly a drone into a stadium and disturb a whole football game and have all kinds of issues there.
Right. So speaking of stadiums and things like that, rules about flying a drone over people is in the process of and getting ready to change here in the near future. Up until 2023, you can, but then the regulation becomes a little more restrictive after September. I think it's September of 23. Can you tell me a little bit about what the new rule is going to say?
Well, right now, you can fly over crowds as long as you're a remote licensed airman. So as long as you have a license to fly over a crowd or fly a drone from the FAA, you can fly over a crowd. You can't if you don't. Well, you can't fly a drone really if you don't anyways. But in 2023, your drone has to be remote ID compliant, which means if you're flying a drone over a crowd and somebody goes, I wonder whose drone that is, and they take their phone out, they click a button, it has to say who you are and all kinds of stuff. Right now, the drone I have isn't quite considered remote ID compliant yet. It does have remote ID type features where if somebody else has the DJI Fly app on their phone, it will tell them what drone is flying in the area. But that doesn't quite meet the requirements of the remote ID. A lot of drones will gain that as a firmware update, once the companies deal with the FAA to figure out how that's going to work. And they are also going to sell modules that you can just hook up to your drone. But you can fly over crowds. That just changed in April. So in April of 2021, that changed. You can fly over crowds now. Before that, you could not fly over anybody that was not directly involved in the production.
Right. Yeah, because of safety issues and things like that. So now the rule is you can fly over crowds as long as you're Part 107 licensed. And then starting in 23, then you have to have that remote ID feature part of your drone in order to be able to do that.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, and that's just to keep the crowd safe. You know, they don't want people flying a drone over a crowd where they have no idea what they're doing. And I think the law really changed because drones now handle smoother. They fly better. They don't just, oh, my battery's dead and drop out of the sky. My drone, when it gets to 13% battery, it goes, I'm coming home and I'm landing. So.
And you can't override that.
No, not once it gets to 13%. It tries to do it at 30%, and you can override that if it's like not far away. But it makes sure you have enough battery power for it to land where it took off.
Yeah. So one of the other safety issues that people talk about is flying at night. And so what are the rules about drones in the air either at night or early in the morning?
Well, so you get 30 minutes before and after official sunset and sunrise, where it's called civil twilight. You can still fly your drone then. Anytime more than 30 minutes after sunset or more than 30 minutes before sunrise, you have to have anti-collision lights, which no drones come with. You have to add them. It's not something they come with. You have to be able to see that anti-collision light for 3 statute miles. So if you're flying at night, flying a drone, they have to see that light for 3 statute miles in every direction, which if you're flying a drone at night and you have that, you're going to make a lot of people mad because it's going to be really bright.
Correct. And of course, that's all safety precautions. And just to let, both residents and people who may be on the ground or other airmen in the air know that you're there.
Right. So it's the same basic principle as like the lights on the top of radio towers and cell towers. Those blinking lights are so that planes know that those are there.
The beacons. Right. So let me ask this. What interested you in getting into flying a drone or droning or I don't know. I suppose droning would be the term for it, but flying a drone, whatever.
Well, when I started here in Trempealeau County, we already had a drone. The person that was here before me was a Part 107 licensed airman. So I just wanted to, be able to get shots with that drone. Well, that drone crashed and into a tree stump. Didn't cause any damage to other people's property, so I didn't have to report it to the FAA. But the idea of being able to get unique shots for our television channel really drove the whole concept of we should get a new drone and all of that. So we spent about a good amount of money on a high quality drone so we can take quality video that when you're watching it in HD on TV, it's still HD. We didn't want a cheap drone. We wanted something that can take good quality video, and we've used it in a lot of stuff. As last weekend we flew it at a concert and spliced that in to the video to make it just more interesting and unique.
If somebody is interested in becoming a drone pilot and decides, right, wrong, or indifferent, that they want to take their drone out before they get their license, and the footage that you use has a couple of different purposes. One is, again, just for simple personal, non-commercial usage. But then there's the other part of it is, and there's always this very fine gray line in here as to what can be used for personal purposes and what are used for commercial, non-commercial purposes, and then what can be used for commercial purposes. If you are a non-licensed pilot and the footage that you record ends up in a commercial or promotional usage, that is something that is deeply frowned upon by the FAA, is it not?
Yes, that's a very big no-no. You don't want to do that. That's a big fine, and they can actually bar you from getting a license, and they can confiscate your drone. If your drone's not registered, they can confiscate your drone.
And really, if you're flying a drone, the cost of having your drone registered with the FAA is not cost prohibitive. It's a grand total of $5. So, and that's for something that, again, any drone that's a half a pound or 0.55 pounds all the way up to 55 pounds has to be registered with the FAA.
Yeah, and if it's over 55 pounds, it's no longer considered a drone. So that is considered, an aircraft. So then you're under even more restrictions and have to, register that. But another thing, once you register your drone, that registration's only good for 3 years. You have to renew it every 3 years.
And for the registration part, the registration ID needs to be labeled or written or somehow affixed to the aircraft. But then again, as we talked about earlier, come 2023, then it will need to also be able to be broadcast out by this remote ID process, correct?
Correct, but it'll still have to be written on the drone. Or, some people use like a label maker and put it on there. I just used a Sharpie. I mean, nobody sees the drone, so it doesn't have to look pretty. So I just wrote the registration right on it.
When you take your drone out, what are some of the projects that you in Trempealeau are working on?
Well, we've taken it to multiple concerts. So we've taken it to our biggest concert we did was them Cooley Boys, which we've shared with a lot of stations. But we've also done station IDs for our channel where we're flying over, the various cities. We've actually done some stuff for our Department of Land Management where we've flown over stream banks that they were restoring at various stages. They're going to be building a giant building attached to the building I'm in. We're going to get drone footage periodically throughout that as kind of a documentary as it is of this. I've flown just pretty shots. I've taken pretty pictures. We've done some in Rice Lake where we've gotten some really pretty drone stuff. So anybody watching in Rice Lake, yes, that was taken by a licensed drone pilot. It's
please don't report
legit.
it. Yeah, Derek was able to come up some time ago, and he helped us out getting that footage of Main Street and looking at the dam. And then if you look at our new and updated website, the flight from the south end of town up Main Street almost all the way up to the river, that was all done by Derek, and we certainly appreciate your help on that. Had a lot of nice comments on it and looks really good.
Thank you.
These are things that, as we talk about, don't take our word. We should probably make this disclaimer too, that people shouldn't take our word as final law on this. Certainly do your own research, do your due diligence if you're interested in becoming a drone pilot, because as we say, one little misstep could potentially cost a tremendous fine. I think I've read places in the not too distant past where people have been fined upwards of $30,000 and $40,000 for one instance of flying and using commercial footage in a non-commercial situation. So it's definitely something to make sure that you're fully understanding of and know all the rules and regulations. And again, some people may say it's very restrictive and cumbersome and all that sort of thing, but ultimately it's going to keep people safe. It's going to keep you out of potential trouble. And one thing that we may or may not have kind of glossed over here, Derek, is the privacy issue of drones. You mentioned that people owning their house and they own up to 83 feet above the house, but then kind of that gray area up to 500 feet. What are some of the things that you kind of help mitigate, that you do to help mitigate privacy concerns of people in your area?
Well, generally, I either fly really high so that if there's somebody out in their yard, you can't even see, right? You don't know they're there. Or I fly in public spaces, a park. I'll fly down the street, because if if somebody can see you from the street, well, you don't have any privacy from the street. So I will fly down a street. I will fly over parks, public spaces. Businesses generally are less risky than flying over a house, because it's kind of a public-ish area. There's a lot of gray space in what you can and can't do, because you can't fly a drone above 400 feet, but under 500 feet could potentially be somebody's airspace. They just haven't decided that yet. So there's a lot of gray space, and generally if you just fly really high so that you can't see anything, other than the tops of houses and getting pretty shots like that, that's usually a safe bet. There's really not any good advice for that, because nobody knows.
Right. Follow your own instincts, and if it feels wrong, don't do it. And if it feels right, then hopefully you're within the guidelines, as gray as they may be. I had one other thing I was going to ask about, and now it just went away from me. So, anything else you want to throw in here before we depart?
Well, another thing is, and this is actually part of the Part 107 test, is you got to watch out for, different personality types flying a drone. You don't want to be impulsive. You don't want to, risk safety by saying, oh, look at how I can fly this tight curve around this, window and crash into the window and break it. So you have to watch out for that. You also have to watch out for alcohol use. The current guidelines are 8 hours without alcohol and a blood alcohol concentration of 0.04 or less. So that it's more restrictive than driving a car.
That's half of what it is driving a car.
Right. So you can't be at a picnic, have a beer at the picnic, and then be like, hey, check out this drone. You can't fly it for 8 hours after you finish, any sort of alcohol, and have a low enough blood alcohol level. Because if you cause damage, they're coming for you.
They're going to get you.
Yep.
All right. Well, very good. Derek, thank you very much, as always. Always look forward to our Director Tech Talks, and we will have another one coming up here in the future, near future.
Yes.
Very good. That's Derek Westby from WTCO TV in Trempealeau County, and I'm James Wyngaard from Rice Lake Community Media, and this is Director Tech Talk.